Lesson 38. This is chapter 46 and 47 from Genesis in the land of Goshen. So, if you remember yesterday, where were the brothers at the end of the story? The 11 brothers. Micah? Okay, they had arrived back home. Again, a wonderful thing for them. Their brother's alive. That guilt is gone. Now they have to tell their father what the household was like. You can imagine Jacob shaking his head when his sons told him the lie that they had been living for the past 22 years. I'm sure Benjamin didn't even have a clue that what had happened to his older brother at the time. So we see all of those things going on. But now it's time for Jacob and his sons and their families to get into these wagons and to begin to head back to Egypt. Okay? So we'll see what happens here. Especially we need to make sure we want to see what happens about Jacob leaving the land of Canaan. That's important too. So chapter 46, please follow along there, starting at verse 1. Okay? And Israel, meaning Jacob, took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry them. And they took their cattle and their goods which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, and his daughters and his sons' daughters, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt. So there's a few important things here. Before leaving the land of Canaan, when he comes to an area, now there probably weren't designated lines like we think of today. Here you are leaving this and such a place and entering. But he's in the area where he's about to leave the land of Canaan. What town did the Bible say that was in? Or what location, place, Amber? Beersheba. And what does Jacob do there? What does he physically do there before he leaves? Micah? He builds up an altar there and offers sacrifices to God. Maybe there's an altar there. We just know that he offered sacrifices here upon the altar to God before he left Canaan. And that night, while in bed, God came to visit Israel, or Jacob. And what did God tell Jacob? What did he tell him, Colin? For remember before, Abraham had gone down to Egypt and he had permission to leave the land. Later on, Isaac had also intended to go down to Egypt when there was a famine, but God told him what? Brody? Not to. Instead, where did he have to go? What king did he visit? Do you remember? Brody? Yeah, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, and Gerar. Jacob is wise. He probably knows that story. And before he leaves the land, he asks God if he may go. And God gives him permission to leave. In fact, God says, I want you to go there. Because while you're there, I will bless you. Your seed, your name, your nation will multiply greatly. And then surely I will bring you back. So he has that promise too. Okay? And he also has the promise that he will see his son Joseph, because Joseph will place his hands on your eyes. So that's a great comfort to Jacob as well, to know that he's going to see him again. Okay? We know what land he's going to get while he's down there. It doesn't say that right here, but we know he's going to be in the land of Goshen, a land that is rich and good fields and places for the animals to graze and grow in. Okay? It also provided, and I asked that question, it also provided a place for the people to live separately. Why did they need to live separately from the Egyptians? Why was that important to God? That they not be right in downtown Egypt, but they instead live on the edge. Kenton? To do what? You're right. What are some things they might be tempted to do? The sin of drunkenness. Amber? Worship other idols and gods, the Egyptian gods. Good. What else is a temptation? Especially for the young men that might pollute the good nation, godly nation. It happened to be before the Tower of Babel. We saw what the sons of God did, the Bible says. Amber?
They married wicked wives.
All right, the sons of God married the wives of man, or the women of the daughters of man. So you would have the godly, if they're there, and now some of them did, because we'll see that what's called the mixed multitude when they leave Canaan. But what we do see is that too. If they're there, they're going to be marrying all the wives, the girls from Egypt. And no longer will they have that strong nation, because those wives will probably bring with them idols and idol worshiping. Okay? So, he's going to keep them in Goshen, a very good land, by themselves. Then we see a list of all the names of those sons, and who they are, and just who they are. But we want to pick up at verse 26 here. Verse 28. That's where we see more of. So, once they arrive in Egypt, what happens? Verse 28. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph, to direct his face unto Goshen. He came into the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot, and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him. And he fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me, and the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle. And they have brought their flocks and their herds, and all that they have with them. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That ye shall say, The servant's trade hath been about cattle. From our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, that we may go in the land of Goshen, that we may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. So they arrive. Judah goes ahead to find where they should go. Joseph, when he hears that they've arrived in Goshen, gets in his chariot and rides in his chariot down to the land of Goshen. And there is that beautiful reunion of father and son. And we see that Jacob wept on his father's neck, probably for a long time. He was happy, but also relieved. He would, if his father had died, he would have had the comfort that his father Jacob was in heaven. But to see his father again once more here on earth also was a great relief to him. And all of those emotions that have been built up in Joseph finally can come out when he sees his father, and his father feels the same way. So much so that his father said, I can die now. If I died right now, I would die in peace. If I died back in the land of Canaan, not knowing what really had happened to you, that always disturbed me. That bothered me. But now I can live in peace. I've seen my son once again. They're all here together. And then Joseph gives wisdom. He said, look, when Pharaoh's going to call you into his house, and he's going to ask you what your occupation is, and you need to tell him that you are shepherds. Tell him that you're the keepers of the flocks and that you would like to dwell in the land of Goshen. And the reason is the Egyptians, first of all, they don't like the shepherds. But secondly, they don't mix with the Hebrews. This will keep you separate. This will keep the Egyptians happy, and it will keep the people, the Israelites, happy. And obviously we know that's a great blessing down the road when God sends a plague. Some of them happen to the people in Egypt, but the Israelites in the land of Goshen are not affected. So there's that there as well. All right, then in chapter 47. So let's see then what happens when these guys get together. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their herds, flocks and herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan. Behold, they are in the land of Goshen. He took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. So he took some of his brothers. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, What is your occupation? And they say unto Pharaoh, Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, For to sojourn in the land are we come. So they're saying, we want to stay here. For thy servants have no pasture for their flocks. For the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. In other words, it's so bad in Canaan, we don't have anything now. Now therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land, make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen, let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. So we see here a few things. The brothers ask what they were supposed to ask for. They say that they are shepherds. Pharaoh says, great. And he doesn't just give them the bad part, but he says, give them the best. These are the brothers of my friend Joseph, who is doing a great job of providing for the Egyptians. Prior to that, but Pharaoh also realizes he's getting wealthy when all the other nations are coming in and leaving their money in Egypt for that grain. Pharaoh likes that. So he wants to keep Joseph happy probably as well, and to reward his brothers. Give them good land. Let's give them good land here. And so that reward is given to them. Give them good land. Okay? And he also says, and if thou knowest any men of activity among them, make them rulers over my cattle. So Pharaoh realizes these men are wise shepherds. These guys are good shepherds. They know how to really do a good job. God blesses them. That's the main reason. But they also know their stuff. So Pharaoh says, well, if any of you have men of activity among you, maybe they're looking for more work, or they really know what to do, make them the rulers over my cattle too. Because he's probably thinking, well, that will make my wealth increase as well. Just as Laban's wealth had increased under Jacob, Pharaoh's wealth could increase under the brothers of Joseph as he tends to their flocks too. Okay? Continuing on, and Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. So now he just brings in his dad. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how old art thou? So right away Pharaoh can see, this man is old. He's older probably than most people in Egypt live. It's because God has blessed him. God has been with him. Okay? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. So Jacob even confesses, he said, look, I'm old. God has blessed me with many years, but I'm not even as old as my fathers were. Abraham and Isaac, they were much older. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before him. So we see that there. Right? They bless one another and then they leave. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Okay? And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. And there was no bread in the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. Okay? So we see here that Jacob speaks to Pharaoh. Okay? Pharaoh blessed him. What do you think that blessing was? Was it a blessing from God? What do you think? It's a hard question, I know. You take a risk and go for it. Colin? Yep, good. That's a good idea. Anybody else? You think it was a blessing from God, that God would greatly bless him? Like give him riches, wealth, or any of those things? We can assume not. Pharaoh is not a godly man here. He's not one who loved the Lord. The blessing that Jacob was giving here is probably right in line with what Colin said. The idea that he's greeting. Well, thank you for taking care of my son, and thank you for bringing us into the land of Goshen and giving us a place. And, something like, long live the king. One of those types of things. Something that's a positive, nice thing to say to the king so that he feels good and realizes that you're thankful and you're on his side. You're not there to create trouble. Okay? Now, let's see how this famine ended. We read a couple verses there that it was sore in the land, and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. But what's interesting to see is how wise Joseph was in his planning, and how wealthy it probably made Pharaoh and the king of Egypt, and also how God was preparing for a future for the people to leave. Okay? Verse 14, and Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money to Pharaoh's house. In other words, all of the money. There wasn't any left, because it says in verse 15, and when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. So in other words, we're out of money, but we need food or we're going to die. We're really being meager here. We're really not taking much each day. We need our daily bread. Give us bread or we die, but we don't have any money. Okay? Joseph said, well, how about something else? Verse 15. And Joseph said, give your cattle and I will give you for your cattle if money fail. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle that year. So here we have it. First, the people could survive on money. They ran out of money. Now they were trading in cattle, sheep, horses, those things. Boy, Pharaoh, you can imagine him rubbing his hands together. Not only is he probably well taken care of food-wise, but he is getting wealthier and wealthier. He has all of the cattle of the land. Verse 18, and when that year was ended, they came unto him the second year and said unto him, we will not hide it from my Lord, how that our money is spent. My Lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our lands. In other words, the only thing we've got left to give you is our bodies, to be your servants, or you can have our land. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh. And give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt, even unto the other end thereof. Only the land of the priest bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. Okay? So, now the people sell their land. Now the people sell themselves to be servants of Pharaoh. So now they've given up all their money. They sold all of their cattle. They've sold their homes, the lands that they farmed before. And now they've sold themselves. They have to be moved into cities. They don't want them still living out on the land. But plus, it makes it easier to distribute the food in more in easier ways if the people are living together. So all the people begin to get gathered in cities. And Joseph is now able to hand out the grain that we see there. Okay? And he does that in a more efficient way. Okay, so the famine is still going. So now the people are in the cities. They have nothing left to trade. They can only work for Pharaoh. That's the only way that they can earn that. The only people who aren't affected are the priests, because Pharaoh gives them a special portion to keep them alive. Obviously, he's very concerned about the gods and keeping them happy. Okay? But we could say the same thing too. If it was a time of poorness, of the depression, we probably would make sure not only if you had some food, but if you had leftovers, probably one person you bring it to would be the pastor. As a way, if we can't, maybe I'm out of money. I can't put any more money in the collection plate to help pay you, but I can give you some food that I have left over. Or I can pass these things along so that you don't go hungry. Okay? So let's see how it ends. Verse 23. Then Joseph said unto the people, behold, I have bought you this day in your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the fifth part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be for your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, and for food of your little ones. And they said, thou hast saved our lives, let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priest only, which became not Pharaoh's. So we see there, Joseph wisely had saved seeds, so that when this famine was over, he could now present to them seeds. But no longer are they planting seeds on their own land. No longer are they their own workers, but now they're all workers, servants of Pharaoh. And they're working Pharaoh's land. So here's seed that you can go back and you can plant. Okay? But 1/5 of everything that you bring in now belongs to Pharaoh. And he probably gave them their lands back and their stuff like that. But they had to pay, we could call it a tax. Okay? For Pharaoh having saved them and been kind to them and feeding them during that time, now you have to pay back Pharaoh. Okay? Verse 27, and Israel, meaning Jacob, dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die, and he called his son Joseph, and said unto him, if now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and thou shalt bury me in their burying place, meaning the cave of Jaden. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, swear unto me. And he sware unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. So here Jacob calls in his son, and we'll see that here a little bit, but he doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. Don't let my bones stay here. Canaan is the promised land. It's a picture of heaven. That's where I want to be buried, in the place that is a picture of heaven, not here in this wasteland. Okay? This is no different than a picture of living in hell. I want to be living in the promised land. Bury my bones there. And now, today we might make an agreement with a handshake. Here we see, how did they make their agreement? Where did Joseph take his hand and placed it, Amber? His father, is he lying in bed or sitting down, so placed it under his thigh. And that was a way of showing, hey, that this was an agreement that they had made. He promised to do it. He would keep that promise. Okay? So, there's some good lessons again there from Joseph, how he's been wise with his gifts. He's prepared for the future, but especially we can see too, when we talked about living separate, that's an important part too. We too in our lives live separate from the world. We don't live like the world. Yes, we have to work with them. Yes, we might have to play with them and do things with them. But in a sense, we keep ourselves pretty separate from the wicked world. We don't want to be like Lot and leave the church here and say, boy, it's nice living here, but I'd rather go live in that big city of Madison. It's much more fun there. And get into all the troubles and sins of life over there and realize that we're hardly coming back to visit the church anymore. We're off to Milwaukee because it looks like such a fun place to live. But we need to live with the church, and that's what's important. That's why it's important to keep them together, keep them separate from the Egyptians there in the land of Goshen, and our lives too. And make sure we do that. We serve God first. That's a foremost thing. Okay?